He was worth billions. He ruled Hong Kong's skyline. And one morning he vanished. Walter Kwok, the heir to Hong Kong's richest family, was kidnapped in broad daylight by a gang so ruthless they demanded an $80 million ransom and got away with it. For a week, Walter was locked in a wooden crate, blindfolded, fed scraps, and beaten until the ransom was paid. But the scars weren't just physical. When he returned, he was different. And so was the family. Another brother is also struggling behind bars. Not in Hong Kong's glittering towers or a marble boardroom, but in solitary confinement. A billionaire, barefoot, locked in silence. This was not a political dissident. Not a gangster. This was Thomas Kwok, heir to the greatest fortune in Hong Kong, facing charges that would rip the city's elite wide open. Behind the glossy towers and billion-dollar deals, the Kwok brothers were turning on each other. What followed was a brutal power struggle, a corruption scandal that rocked the government, and a courtroom betrayal that would send one brother to prison and another into exile. This isn't just a story about wealth. It's about what happens when a family builds an empire and then watches it crack from the inside. How did the son of one of Asia's most powerful men end up in jail and kidnapped? And to understand how Hong Kong's quiet dynasty fell into chaos, we have to go back to the moment their golden legacy began. Kwok Tak-seng didn't come from money. He made it. Born in Guangdong in 1911, he fled to Hong Kong during the Chinese Civil War, a penniless refugee in a chaotic city. While others scrambled to survive, Kwok saw opportunity. Bricks, steel, dirt. He didn't just want to build buildings, he wanted to build power. In 1972, he co-founded Sun Hung Kai Properties. What started as modest developments quickly became a glass and steel landmark. Hong Kong was transforming into a global hub, and Kwok Tak-seng was laying its foundation, literally. By the 1980s, SHKP was dominating Hong Kong's skyline. Skyscrapers, shopping malls, entire districts bore his company's name behind closed doors. However, he was already planning something far more complex, turning a company into a legacy. But even then, he knew fortunes fade, empires fall. Why he spent years grooming his sons, Walter, Thomas, and Raymond, to inherit not just a company, but a kingdom. On paper, they were perfect. The obedient eldest, Walter, the calculating middle son, Thomas, the quiet tactician. Together, they were supposed to secure the future of the family dynasty. But the bigger the fortune, the deeper the cracks. Especially when you have 3 sons, and only one crown. When Kwok Tak-seng died in 1990, the empire didn't pass quietly. Tensions simmered behind boardroom doors. Control wasn't divided, it was fought over. And slowly the cracks began to show. Walter, once the crown prince of SHKP, began making decisions that alarmed the others. He leaned heavily into spiritual advisors, consulting feng shui masters, moving offices based on superstitions. His behavior grew erratic. Behind the scenes, Thomas and Raymond began consolidating power. In 2008, they made a move. Walter was ousted from the company their father had built. The media framed it as a boardroom shuffle. But it was a quiet coup. Walter sued *, he lost, and then he disappeared from the headlines. Meanwhile, Thomas and Raymond tightened their grip on SHKP, overseeing projects worth billions. The family was never the same. 3 brothers raised under the same roof, trained for the same throne, now stood on opposite sides of a corporate battlefield. But what neither side knew was that a far greater threat was coming. One that wouldn't just divide the brothers, but put one of them behind bars and the entire family under public scrutiny like never before. To understand how it all unraveled, we need to follow the money, because behind the towers of Sun Hung Kai, there was a secret, and it would soon explode in the biggest corruption scandal Hong Kong had seen in decades. In 1997, just months after Hong Kong was handed back to China, one of the most terrifying crimes in the city's modern history unfolded in total silence. Walter Kwok, the eldest son of the Kwok dynasty and the public face of Sun Hung Kai Properties, was kidnapped by the infamous gangster big spender Chung Chak-tung. Known for his violent methods and high-profile targets, Chung had already abducted billionaire Victor Lee. Now he had Walter, the heir to Hong Kong's richest family, was blindfolded, beaten, and locked in a wooden crate for days. No communication, no negotiation. The kidnappers demanded a ransom of over $600 million HKD, around $80 million United States dollars. And they got it. No police, no trial, just silence. The family paid in full. Walter was released, but he returned a different man, quieter, more withdrawn, shaken in ways few could imagine. But something else changed. Thomas and Raymond, once his junior partners, they began to edge closer to the center of power. There were whispers that Walter's trauma had made him unstable, that his reliance on spiritual advisors and feng shui masters in the aftermath of the kidnapping raised questions about his leadership. Reportedly started relocating entire offices based on astrology. He made decisions that his brothers viewed as irrational. The tight-knit family had become fractured, and the fracture was widening. By 2008, the internal conflict became uncontainable. Thomas and Raymond acted swift. Walter was forced out of SHKP. It was a brutal, bloodless coup. The company painted it as a disagreement over direction, but insiders knew Walter had been pushed out of his father's empire. Still, the storm wasn't over, because behind the sleek corporate surface of Sun Hung Kai, something darker was unfolding, a web of secret payments, political favors, and quiet collusion. In 2012, the Independent Commission Against Corruption, ICAC, Hong Kong's feared anti-graft agency, made an unprecedented move. They arrested Thomas Kwok, one of the city's most powerful men, alongside SHKP's executive Thomas Chan. The charge: bribing Raphael Hui, the former chief secretary of Hong Kong. Prosecutors alleged that Hui had secretly accepted millions in payments from SHKP in exchange for insider information, zoning changes, project approvals, early access to confidential government decisions. It was the kind of information that could move markets or make $1 billion difference. The public was stunned. The trial became a media circus, a spectacle of wealth, corruption. The courtroom was packed daily. Reporters camped outside the ICAC office, waiting for updates. In the end, the verdict was as shocking as the charges. Thomas Kwok, guilty, sentenced to 5 years in prison. Raymond Kwok, acquitted, untouched. Raphael Hui, guilty, 7.5 years. The message was clear. No one, not even Hong Kong's richest family, was above the law, but the deeper message was more haunting because the trial didn't just expose bribery. It exposed something far more human, that behind the billion-dollar towers and polished corporate statements, the Kwok family was collapsing from within. The empire their father had built was no longer bound by blood. It was now splintered by ego, fear, and betrayal. But the family wasn't finished yet, because even in disgrace, they were still in control. And what kept their empire intact wasn't just business acumen. It was something or someone hidden from the spotlight, a figure who never gave interviews, who never appeared in scandal, and yet may have been the most powerful of them all. While one brother sat in prison and another disappeared into silence, the Kwok family empire kept printing money. Because scandals fade, headlines shift, but in Hong Kong, land is forever. Sun Hung Kai Properties, SHKP, never stopped. It owns more developable land in Hong Kong than almost any other company. Vast chunks of the city's skyline, the ICC, the tallest skyscraper in town, mega malls like Newtown Plaza, and sprawling housing complexes home to millions. From the central business district to the outer islands, the Kwoks aren't just landlords, they are landscape architects of power. Their model was simple but lethal: acquire land in bulk, build vertically, and charge premium rents in a city with sky-high housing demand. At the height of their control, their fortune exceeded $40 billion. Even after the 2019 protests, they remained Hong Kong's richest family. The secret to their survival: tight control through a complex web of family trusts and holding companies. SHKP wasn't just a business, it was a fortress, and behind the towering profits stood the family matriarch, Kwok Kwai-HinHing, wielding quiet influence over her son's fortunes like a chess grandmaster. But even as the company marched forward, an unexpected figure was stirring in the shadows. Walter Kwok, the exiled eldest son, was back. After his ouster from SHKP in 2008, most assumed Walter would fade quietly into the background. Instead, he launched his own real estate venture, Empire Group Holdings, still in Hong Kong, still in the game. What followed was a slow, deliberate campaign of reinvention. Walter began attending public events again. He gave rare interviews, sometimes cryptic, always calculated. He never directly attacked his brothers, but the message was clear: he wasn't finished. And then came the whispers that Walter had been plotting to re-enter the family business, that he was meeting with political figures behind closed doors, that he still believed SHKP should have been his. Behind the scenes, tensions were still raw. Sources claimed Walter remained estranged from his brothers. The family had never recovered from the fracture, not after the kidnapping. And in 2018, any chance of reconciliation vanished. Walter Kwok passed away suddenly at the age of 68. No grand public mourning, no triumphant return, just silence. The original heir was gone, and the family, once the picture of unity, had become a case study in quiet implosion. But if you thought the drama ended there, you'd be wrong, because the true power behind the dynasty was someone who had never once spoken into a microphone. A figure so private that many outside the family didn't even know her name, and yet her decisions could shift billions or destroy legacies. In a family consumed by public drama, boardroom warfare, and billion-dollar stakes, the most powerful figure of all never once stepped into the spotlight. Her name is Kwok-HinHing, wife of the founder Kwok Tak-seng, mother to Walter, Thomas, and Raymond, and the quiet force who held the real strings behind Hong Kong's most powerful dynasty. She wasn't a CEO, she didn't speak at shareholder meetings, she never gave a single public interview, but in the halls of Sun Hung Kai Properties, everyone knew nothing happened without her approval. When her husband died in 1990, Kwok-HinHing became the family's spiritual and strategic anchor. As matriarch, she oversaw the family trust, the invisible structure that controlled the majority voting shares of SHKP. On paper, it was just a trust. In reality, it was a throne, and sitting quietly on that throne. During the most chaotic chapters in the family's history, the kidnapping, the public ousting of Walter, the bribery scandal, the prison sentence, she remained silent. But insiders say she was far from passive. There are whispers that she supported Thomas and Raymond's move to remove Walter in 2008, that she had grown concerned about his reliance on feng shui and spiritual advisors after the trauma of his abduction, that she believed his erratic leadership could threaten the legacy her husband built. Some say her words sealed Walter's fate. Others say she tried to keep the peace, but was ultimately overruled by her more calculating sons. The truth may never be known because Kwok-HinHing never spoke, never responded, and never lost control. Even as her sons made headlines for all the wrong reasons, she preserved what mattered most. The dynasty itself. The properties stayed profitable. The dividends kept flowing. The family's grip on Hong Kong's land market remained firm. And as the next generation, her grandchildren, slowly entered the picture, it was clear her influence didn't stop with her sons. Like a monarch ruling from behind a curtain, Kwok-HinHing shaped the fate of Hong Kong's most elite family. But the world was changing, protests in the streets, economic shifts, a younger generation asking new questions, and a city that once revered tycoons now looks at them with suspicion. The question is, what happens when the matriarch is gone? Who inherits the power when the last shadow falls? Because dynasties were built in silence. In a city defined by glass towers and fortune, the Kwok family stands as both architects and cautionary tale. They came from nothing, built everything. Their rise was legendary, a father's vision turning dirt into gold, shaping Hong Kong's skyline with steel and silence. Their fall, however, was deeply human: betrayal, ambition, fear, and fractured bloodlines. Walter, the firstborn, kidnapped, exiled, and eventually gone. Thomas, once the golden son, was jailed in disgrace. Raymond, the quiet survivor, left alone at the helm. And above them all, the silent matriarch Kwok-HinHing, orchestrating the empire from behind the curtain, protecting what her husband left behind, even as her sons tore it apart. Today, the family is still wealthy, still powerful. SHKP remains a titan. But something's changed. Hong Kong is not the same city it was in 1972. The streets are louder, the people are bolder, the foundations are shifting. And the Kwok dynasty, once untouchable, is now facing the one force no fortune can buy off: time. They built Hong Kong, and in many ways Hong Kong built them. What happens when the next generation takes over? They repeat the mistakes of their fathers, or will they find a new way forward? Because in the end, every empire, no matter how rich, how guarded, how invincible, eventually has to answer the same question: can power survive without unity? In the case of the Kwok family, we may be about to find out.